All right, we're here with council candidate Dan Hall, former member of our Democratic Club board. So you've been on the other side of this. Now you're a candidate getting the questions. So let's just have you start with a background of why you're running and whatever else you want to start with.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, John. Really excited to be here, everyone. Great to see everyone. Hi, my name is Dan Hall. I use he, him pronouns for those who are only listening or maybe hard of sight. I am a 5'11" white man with short brown hair, and I'm wearing a white button-down shirt today. I am a renter in the Mid-City neighborhood. I'm an Iraq War veteran. I am a Santa Monica peer board member and a former vice president of the Santa Monica Democratic Club, where I was the #2 in leadership and organized for our progressive values. I'm an elected delegate representing Santa Monica and Assembly District 51 to the California Democratic Party. For my day job, I lead diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives for a workforce of 1.3 million employees. I'm running for city council because I believe that our community deserves leadership that reflect the progressive values that this club espouses, and have created the incredible, vibrant community that we are today. Santa Monicans deserve to have clean streets and safe neighborhoods. We must be pro-housing, pro-renter, and pro-education to remain affordable and inclusive. And we should have leadership that believes in and will promote good government with transparency, accountability, ethics, and efficiency. I'm really excited to talk to you about these issues today, and out on the campaign trail. So thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, thanks for being here. So wanted to start with asking you about your party registration. Now, we know that you're a committed Democrat because of the work you've done for the club, but you mentioned on your questionnaire that uh, up until maybe about 10 or a little bit more than that years ago, you were registered as a Republican. So I know that in the questionnaire you talked about that was because of your family upbringing and that you became a Democrat in response to the rise of the Tea Party and Obama signing Don't Ask, Don't Tell. But do you want to talk about sort of how you saw yourself as a Republican up until that point? And then was there a particular breaking point that made you decide that you wanted to switch parties? And how do you think about your political transformation in that period?
Yeah, sure. So first off, keep in mind that these were my high school years, and I I believed that the Republican Party was the party that had the right values, because those were the values, some of the same values that I was raised with, um, you know, strong families and strong communities. And that was always taught to me that that was the Republican Party that took care of that. And with the rise of the Tea Party and my own kind of political awakening and paying attention to politics much more closely, I quickly realized that that was not the values that I had. And like you said, when I joined the military, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was the policy, and I navigated my own coming out journey under that regime. And so when the Democratic Congress, when the Democratic president, when President Obama signed that bill into law, I felt deeply indebted to the one party that was taking care of me and being an ally to me. And as I continued on my journey of understanding what the parties truly believed in and what I believed in as an adult, independent of how my community, my church, my school raised me, it was clear that the Democratic Party was where I belonged.
Great. Thanks. Well, you're certainly welcome in our big tent party. Anybody yeah, Sam, go for it.
Yeah. Hey, Dan.
Hey, Sam.
Just wondering about your Meals on Wheels volunteer work. How has that inspired you, and what have you learned from the experience?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I love this question. So when my partner joined the Meals on Wheels board, I guess maybe beginning of last year, I don't remember exactly when it was. Um, he was recruited by Anastasia Foster, another friend of the club, obviously. And he and Anastasia both were like, hey, you need to get involved in this. This is really great. Food insecurity is a hugely overlooked issue in our community. Um, and I first did it because I wanted to support my partner and the work that he was doing in the community, in the same way that he does for me by coming to Dem Club meetings or paying attention to city council meetings when I'm watching them. Um, and what I learned when I did my first couple of routes was that this was exposing me to a whole side of Santa Monica that so many people of privilege don't get to see. I was delivering meals to individuals in low income housing or, deed restricted affordable housing units, and seeing the difference between, you know, the different types of providers that were providing those housing opportunities. Um, Going into parts of the neighborhoods that um, you know some folks probably haven't traveled into, to be honest with you. And that's something that has been very enlightening and has allowed me to gain greater perspective on how important the services and um, the services that Meals on Wheels provides, but not just Meals on Wheels, but also, our city, the nonprofits, um, the nonprofit community at large in our community, and what our city government can and should be doing to support those institutions and individuals that need our help.
Lynn.
Hi, Dan. So good to see you. Your background and experience are so impressive. Harvard, West Point, wow, is all I can say. And you mentioned in your questionnaire that as a means to help current unhoused, you are interested in investing further in Project Homes Key opportunities and exploring transitional tiny home options based on successful models seen in LA. Can you explain what Project Home Key is and what you meant by transitional tiny home options?
Yeah, so Project Home Key is an LA kind of regional project that allows governments to rent like motels and unused hotel rooms for housing the unhoused. It's meant to be a temporary kind of transitional solution until they can get into more permanent supportive housing. We just opened a project here in Santa Monica that, to my knowledge, has been very successful. And I think we should look for opportunities to expand that. I'm a big believer in permanent supportive housing. Don't get me wrong, but I also think that there are opportunities we should be pursuing to remove, sorry, not to remove, but to move folks into housing as soon as possible. And I'm open to exploring opportunities like Project Home Key and also, kind of tiny home villages that we've seen be really successful out on the VA campus and in other parts of LA, where that entire boulevard or that entire part of Wilshire Boulevard was filled with unhoused encampment for the greater part of the pandemic. And when the VA partnered with some nonprofits to develop, I think it's like 200 something little tiny homes right there on the VA property, that block was able to be cleared, and it's now open and much safer than it was in the past when there were fires and stuff was like spilling out onto the street as cars were passing by. And so I think it would be great for us to look into options like that. I know some of the incumbents, some of my opponents had suggested we look into that, and nothing has happened. That was one of the first meetings that they had when they were on council, and where are the solutions? What's going on? And it's unfortunate that there hasn't been the follow through in that.
Thank you.
Isabel.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, Dan. So yeah, besides homelessness, just affordability is also a huge problem in Santa Monica, for renters or for anyone, even contemplating buying a home. Many of us who have lived here for decades, our kids can't afford to stay here. What are your thoughts of, some of the top solutions about making housing more affordable in Santa Monica?
Thanks. Yeah. So I'm a big believer in pulling all levers. I'm not a one solution fits all type of believer. I think we need to be stabilizing our long-term tenants and renters with the best tenant protections, with enforcement of our short-term rental ordinances, to ensure that our rental stock is available for renters and not for tourists. I also believe in supply. I think that we need to build more housing for our community to stay affordable. We can allow individuals to use triggering words like upzoning to scare people that more housing is a bad thing, or we can gently densify the city in downtown infill and across our commercial boulevards and in our high resource areas to along transit to allow greater opportunity for people to come here and live here and stay here. And then I also believe strongly in subsidy. That's why I supported Measure GS in 22. That's why I support it now and why I'm against the proposed amendments, because I think that our city government should be investing in deed restricted affordable housing. And we should be, putting our money where our mouth is and when it comes to our values. And I saw Measure GS as a good way to do that.
All right, Mike.
Hey, Dan, well, you anticipated part of my question.
I saw your hand up next.
Yes, but in any event, obviously one of those levers is putting public resources into creating more affordable housing and rent subsidies to keep the people who are housed, keep it affordable for them. We twice now have gotten the voters of Santa Monica saying yes to that, passing 2 Measure GSs, but both of them are effectively under attack. The city council has taken $36.5 million so far from the original Measure GS and the Housing Trust Fund, and is talking about taking more. And after unsuccessfully trying to convince Santa Monica voters not to pass Measure GS and unsuccessfully bringing a legal challenge to GS, now we have Cypress Equity and Madison Capital funding an effort to place on the ballot, if they succeed, a measure to exempt all existing and new multifamily housing, which would mean that, for example, Douglas Emmett could sell the shores without having to make any contribution whatsoever to affordable housing or our schools. So what is your view on each of those problems? And with the second one, since it is an electoral issue, if it does get on the ballot, what would you be doing to try and convince the voters of Santa Monica to go along with your views on that?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So like I said, I supported Measure GS every time it came before this board for a vote at SMDC. And while I was on the executive board, I knocked on hundreds of doors supporting Measure GS during the 2022 election. When it comes to the proposed amendments, look, I've studied economics, I've studied economic development, I've studied investing. Like, you can't tell me that the market has had time to adjust to the new tax reality within 12 months of implementation. I trust the proponents of Measure GS, and if in years to come, investors continue to freeze out Santa Monica because of Measure GS or Measure ULA in LA, then let's have a discussion then, but not now. It's too soon. I think it's far too soon. I think the market needs the time to adjust. And so that's why I'm against the amendments now, and would not support them in this election at all. And I intend to make that statement during my campaign. It's why I'm willing to talk about it now. It's why I'm willing to talk about it with voters when I'm outdoor knocking in the future. The other part of your question around the Housing Trust Fund, I've said it before and I'll say it again today. I'm committed to restoring the funds in our Housing Trust Fund. It was an unfortunate reality that we were facing economically, that the Housing Trust Fund was rated in the way that it was, but we as a community, like I said, we've always put our money where our mouth is, at least under elected leaders that have been supported by this club and SMER and other organizations, and largely thanks to some of the leaders in this room. We've done even more of that lately. And I think it's important that we fulfill those commitments that the voters have asked us to fulfill. And that means, to me, restoring the Housing Trust Fund.
Okay, thanks. Keith.
Great. Hey there, Dan. How's it going?
Hey, Keith.
Good. It's good to see you. Hey, so thanks for briefly sharing your kind of day-to-day efforts at the firm that you work with, describing that you helped to lead DEI efforts for almost 1.3 million employees. I do appreciate that leadership. And so my question kind of follows along on that vein as it relates to corporations and corporations' duty in some respects to be mindful community partners uh, in innovative ways beyond maybe some that traditionally have been viewed. So, how would you perhaps see being a sitting council member of helping to usher in a new era of greater corporate involvement in city innovation and support and management beyond kind of just standard vendor or contractual relationships?
Can't say this is a question I've gotten on the campaign trail yet so far. I think there is a strong responsibility for corporations to be great partners in the public space. I think that corporations, particularly when it comes to development in communities such as ours, we're a highly desirable place with a educated workforce and obviously great geographic location. When corporations want to come here and build here, we should be looking at what sort of community benefits they're going to provide for our community. Corporations extract from communities they participate in, and they should be willing to give back to those communities in an equal manner. I'm pleased that the corporation I work for is involved in many of that in many ways, and would like to see other corporations do the same. There are bad actors that we have to be very vigilant against. We see giant real estate firms like Douglas Emmett trying to evict hundreds of tenants at Barrington Plaza. If that eviction is allowed to go through, where do you think they're coming next? They're coming to Santa Monica. They're going to go to the shore and convert those two rental buildings into luxury condos on the beach. And I don't think that is a great way for corporations to be acting in partnership with communities that they ought to be serving. Does that answer your question? I hope it did.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're talking about clearly we have to be mindful of the bad actors and try and find ways to sort of push them back, so to speak. But the other part of it is that, the ones that may be okay actors or just kind of actors sitting on the side, how do we help them, kind of move in the direction that you described, which is, corporations, should be vibrant partners in the communities that they're in, and they should be as innovative about those kind of partnering relationships with the city, with the community, and et cetera. Just new ideas moving in that direction.
Yeah, it's a great question. How do I want to answer this? I think you're right. I think Democrats in particular, because we are typically considered very pro-labor, and I consider myself a very pro-labor candidate, there's sometimes seems to be an assumption that because you're pro-labor, you're anti-business, or if you are pro-business, that means you're anti-labor, and that makes no sense to me. And so I'll kind of reframe your question around this dichotomy that sometimes exists in politics. And I don't think that has to be the case here in Santa Monica. You know, our hospitality union, Local 11, for example, has been a massive partner in the economic success of our community, keeping some of our best hotels staffed and welcoming for the tourists that drive our economy. You know, in my mind, there's no excuse that these strikes over the past year had lasted as long as they did. And that to me is almost a lack of leadership from the city as well and our elected leaders to bring the corporations to the table in a way that was beneficial for the entire community. Um, and frankly, you know, some of our elected leaders were attempting to stymie the First Amendment rights of the workers during those strikes, which I frankly thought was disgusting. That's not leadership. That's not collaboration. That's not bringing people to the table. Um, you know, my partner founded a small business. It was a restaurant, in fact, and you know, he'll tell you that the sweat equity that a small business owner puts in to make ends meet is enormous. And that was in San Francisco with sky high rents like we do. So I get it. Like businesses are tough, and in this current environment, where economic development has not been a priority for our elected leaders. Um, you know, we ought to be leveraging relationships with good actor corporations, with our small businesses, with our city economic development staff to ensure that our community are getting the benefits that should come with great relationships. And um, there shouldn't be these adversarial relationships in the way that sometimes exist.
Great, thanks.
Dan, I wanted to ask you about your remark in your questionnaire that said the answers to the promenade's problems lie in zoning, outdated building designs, and property owners who aren't properly incentivized to lease. Sounds like you've got the spark of some larger thought there that didn't really get to fully come out in their questionnaire because that you were kind of answering it. It was a different question, and then you kind of went there. So I was very intrigued to know more about, you know, obviously the city is facing this Promenade 3.0 as they rethink about and figure out how to modernize the Promenade for the current and future times. So what kinds of uh, direction would you like to see the Promenade go, and what kind of changes do you think are the most important to make that come back to life and be a really prominent and thriving part of the city?
Yeah, thanks, John. So, I mean, I think the answers are pretty obvious. I think we should implement the Third Street Promenade Stabilization and Vitality Plan and the Promenade 3.0 vision that was produced under the former DTSM CEO Kathleen Rawson and the former board that existed before the current board. You know, these plans have been sitting on the shelf for years, and our council has ignored them. And so what do we have? We have vacancies up and down the 1200 block and across the promenade. And you can't tell me that when great businesses like John Reed and Barnes and Noble and McConnell's are coming to the promenade, like you can't tell me that we have vacancies because of crime. Like I just don't believe that is the case. The promenade is literally 3 streets away from one of the top 10 most Instagrammed locations in the world. There's really no excuse that the economic development of the promenade and the downtown has kind of been put on a shelf for the past few years. I think the other part of this answer is that we should always be looking for ways to increase foot traffic in front of these storefronts. And that to me means we can't just be obviously tourism is year round in a community like ours. There are obviously high seasons and low seasons. And one way to increase foot traffic and to ensure that our downtown's vibrant, our corner coffee shop is there in a few years, even though rents continually increase in a community like ours, is to ensure that there's foot traffic. And that to me means housing. And we shouldn't be shy about putting housing on our commercial corridors or downtown. And I think there are opportunities for more housing in downtown, for more housing on our commercial boulevards to ensure that our businesses are able to thrive.
Great. Let's go to Patricia.
Dan, I just wanted to thank you for recognizing that the question about downtown should have been under economic recovery and economic development and not under, and I'm sorry, John, that I hadn't recognized that earlier. So thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, well, but just piggybacking off of your remark and Patricia's noticing of the remark, I mean, what are your additional thoughts with regard to that relationship there? I mean, it's certainly been brought to the fore by some of the incumbents about the relationship between crime and how that pertains to the economic development issues. What do you think is that relationship?
Thanks, John. So I think I'll just address public safety and law enforcement in general as I answer this. And that's, I come at the issue of public safety and the topic of law enforcement and crime from a dual perspective, and it's really rooted in my professional background. I'm a veteran, so there's no one on the dais right now, and there's no one in this campaign except for me who has experienced what it's like to put yourself in physical harm to protect and to serve. And I get it. I understand the adrenaline rush that a police officer faces or a firefighter faces when they're going into danger. I understand the need for training, the need for technology, the need for equipment, but also the need for robust policies and procedures and oversight. To your point, John, some of the business owners or property owners rather in downtown have, and folks out in the neighborhoods have suggested that a cop on every corner is going to solve our problems. And that's just simply not the case. Like, I understand the tactics of patrolling and what they are asking for will not stop crimes from happening. I also come from the background of a diversity, equity, and inclusion professional. In my day job, like Keith was bringing up, I analyze equity data for over 1 million employees. That's 14 times the size of our city. So when a reputable research organization or university or the National Institutes of Health says that Black and Latino individuals are stopped disproportionately compared to white individuals, I believe it because I understand the data. When our city's inspector general says that, yes, our internal RIPA data analysis was sound by SMPD, but limited, and we need to contract with an external sociological statistical analysis firm or statistician, I also get that because I have to do the same thing with my own work. And to tie it back to economic development, I don't believe that crime is what is causing our downtown and our promenade specifically to stay vacant. There are other ways we can be incentivizing and or penalizing the property owners from keeping those places vacant. And we should be looking at those instead of trying to police our way out of an economic development issue.
Great. Well, thanks for being here. Good to see you again, and good luck on the campaign.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time. And I'll just say in closing that the Dem Club has been my home base. I first found community here. It's where my friends are. It's where I've been able to contribute to making this city a better place. I would be honored to have your endorsement and this board's recommendation. So thank you for your time and consideration. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Dan.